Hi everybody, happy Tuesday. Welcome back for the second half of making a pierced and stamped ring shank and setting a square rectangular stone. So this week is all about the setting. Last week we made the shank that included some pierce cutouts and some stamping. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to start with some 26 gauge bezel wire, and this is 3/16 width that I'm going to start with. My stone is pretty tall, so this might be just right, but we will see. I'm just going to place my bezel wire at about the midpoint here and just start pushing it around the stone. So I'm just doing kind of a gentle push around the stone. And when I fold that over, you can kind of see where the other side is underneath there. Kind of bumps it up a little bit. And I'm just going to make a mark. And I'm going to go a little bit longer so that when I cut that, I'd rather it be a little bit longer than too short. I like to just use these scissors and cut right across. And then I'm going to take some flat nose pliers and just give it a little squeeze just to straighten that out. And then I'm just going to trim with the scissors on the outside of that marked line. So just outside of that. And I'm just going to kind of back and forth, get that lined up. And then I'll again take the flat nose pliers and just pinch it together, because I want to try and get those two edges lined up as close as I can. I think before I solder this shut, I'm going to go ahead and mark off a little piece for the back plate. There. And then I can take this over to the shear and trim that off. Just brush a little flux on both sides of that seam. I gave that a quick clean up in the pickle, dried it off, and I'm going to test it around the stone again. I'm just going to push it up against the edge of my bench a little bit to that shape. That looks better. And actually that bezel is a little bit taller than I needed, so I could sand that down quite a bit. I should have checked it first and cut it down to size, but that's okay. And I'm sanding a little bit, and then I'm rotating the piece, because you're never going to put an exact pressure. So I'll just do a little bit, rotate it. I like to use one of my little steel blocks to check that I've gotten the bezels flat, and I just kind of hold it up and look to see if I can see any light coming underneath. And this one looks good. Let's see if I've squished it out of shape or if my stone still drops in. Let's see. I think I've squished it a little bit. There we go. Okay, I think we've got it. Okay, one end's a little bit narrower than the other, so it's definitely got a specific way to drop into there. Now we can go back to the soldering bench and put that down to the back plate. Have the bezel soldered onto the back plate, and I went ahead and did my muck stamp and the sterling stamp. And one thing, I like to make my back plates about the same thickness as the ring shank. I think that looks good. So now I'm just going to go back and trim up the corners and round those out to match the edge of the bezel. I've put in one of my sandpaper barrels, and I'm going to go back and clean up the sides and round out those edges a little bit more. I'm switching to a finer grit sandpaper barrel. I'm going to go back around, but I'm also going to come around the edge of the bezel and kind of soften that sharp edge. I'm just going to go around the whole bezel too with this softer sandpaper. Now the tricky part of eyeballing and a little bit of measuring to figure out the placement for the shank. I tend to just eyeball a lot of things. And that looks good on this side to side. And that looks good. I'm going to make a couple of little pencil marks. Just to kind of give myself... Actually, I should do that with the Sharpie. That'll last longer on there when I heat that up. Just going to make a little mark where the edge of that shank. So I just put a couple, let's see, of little marks. That way I know where those set. Go back to the soldering bench and I'm going to flow a little bit of solder on the shank. I've brushed some flux on here, and now I'm going to take the shank and using my little Sharpie marks, line that up. Trying to look at it from the top and make sure I've got it even on the sides. Okay, let's heat it up. Saw it just drop a little bit, so now I'm looking for that little shiny flow of silver or solder all the way around. Especially right on the edges. I think we've got it. So it's all soldered, and I just kind of went over it real quickly with this little, it's not a 3M pad, but kind of like your kitchen scrubbies. But I'm going to go through around the edges with a pumice wheel and just kind of soften the sharp edges up. Did a little dip in the patina bath. I'm just going to go over it again with this little scrubby pad and remove a little bit of the patina. Got lots of good texture in there to hold in the dark patina. And now I'm going to throw it in the tumbler for a couple hours. The ring is out of the tumbler and looking really good. It really helps, I think, darken the low spots when it's run through the tumbler. Those little pierced out parts just seem darker than when they originally went into the tumbler. It's going to look really nice with the stone since it has such black areas in it. So now we're going to set our stone. I'm going to get out my little vise. And let's see, we're going to need something soft so that I don't scratch the sides to put into here. I like to use polishing cloth a lot of times just to put in there. Let's see. Tighten that up. I don't want to squeeze it too hard, but just enough that it's not going to move on me. Drop our stone in and let's gather up the setting tools. I like to start with this little pusher tool, and I'm going to start on the corners. And kind of rock back and forth and push in. Rock and push. Kind of go in on the sides a little bit now. Just taking extra care around those corners because I don't want anything to kink. So it's just taking my time and just slowly pushing that and rocking those corners especially. Hi, Victor. Hi. Oh. Victor just jumped on my back. Oh my goodness, Victor. Let everybody see what you're doing. What are you doing, mister? Oh. Hop on the chair. There. Yeah. Whoop. There you go. I'm just waiting for the day that he does that to me while I'm soldering. Oh. Okay, it feels pretty good. There's still a little bit of movement in there, and I can kind of see a little gap at a couple of corners, so I just need to keep rocking and pushing that forward or over. And if you have a hammer hand piece or an engraving setup, would work great for this. And I probably will finish up a little bit on this one with my pole scraper. So far. But I think I will take this over to the engraving bench and get that bezel pushed in even more. Okay, I'm over at the engraving bench and I'm using the pole scraper. I've got a little brass rod with kind of a, let's see, I don't know if you can see, just kind of a flat polished edge. And I'm just gonna go around and tap this in even more. Had too much coffee already. Uh-oh. Hands are shaking. I really love the pole scraper. I can set it for these little hammer taps and for however many I want, and then kind of enough space to move before it strikes again. And you could do this by hand, just with a hammer and a little brass bit, and just tap it all along the edge. I'm happy with that now. There's no rocking or movement in the stone. I've gotten that bezel tightened up around it. But I've got, you know, some little hammer marks. So now I'm going to take the pumice wheel and just run it around the edge of there. Smooth out those little hammer marks. I'm going to switch over to a polishing wheel and just go around that edge again. Polishing pad. we're all set. So there we have it, a pierced and stamped ring shank with a squared stone. Yeah, I like that one. Hope you enjoyed following me along while I made this ring, and probably see you in like 2 weeks. I think I may start doing every other week, or maybe just one project a month instead of weekly like I've done for the past year. At least until I can get caught up on some videos, maybe. I'm a little bit behind schedule right now, so I think every other week or once a month right now for a little bit. But hope you enjoyed this and that you make your own pierced and stamped ring. Have fun.